What is the truth about Satan? There are some in your present human world who, having achieved a partial memory of their own pattern of incarnation, conclude that the descent into biological form would not have occurred had it not been for excessive fear and over-identification with the past. Yet this is not the case. Incarnation into biological form was intended from the beginning. As incarnation into biological form occurred, each spirit could have remained fully conscious of its eternal nature and its hologrammatic relationship to the eternal source. Indeed, a few spirits did remain conscious of this. Your fragmentation and your over-identification with an exclusive sense of self distorted your process of incarnation. However, it did not cause it. You, and others of your light circle, had long before chosen to spearhead the Eternal One's exploration and development of the material universe. Your fall into fearful thought and non-fluid patterns of identity was not mere happenstance. An influence encouraged you in this direction, encouraged you to identify with an exclusive sense of separate self. With the exception of the luminous principalities, those angels who were the first to incarnate humanly, virtually all members of your race fell under the spell of this influence at some point during their journeys into biological form. We call this influence the materializing influence, or when speaking in the plural, the forces of materialization. The materializing influence is the force of specified definition. It plays a central role in the creation and sustenance of the dimensional universe. Like frost drawing individualized ice crystals from the air, this influence draws crystallizations of basic molecular structure from the omnipresent energy currents of eternal love. The materializing influence is the principle of contraction that holds energy efficiently bound in matter. It guides the internal dynamics of matter and energy distribution in stars, as well as the thermal and geological processes of planets like the Earth. It is the quintessential materializing principle at its most basic level. This influence is personified, as are all qualities and influences in this potent universe. In the West, both the influence itself and its personifications have been referred to as Satan. Yet stereotypical images of Satan have prevented many people from understanding the real nature of the materializing principle. Satan is the personified principle that rules the background landscape of creation, as well as the many highly focused elemental beings who work together to regulate the systems and processes of materiality. These universally systemic beings are the Creator's means of keeping material structure, that is, all energy patterns without the individualized selfhood that comes with personal will, in assigned patterns of form and behavior. They are the caretakers of creation's landscape, the rulers of subconscious processes and events. Together they implement the laws that maintain the universal landscape. Mechanical laws, physical laws, gravitational, electrical, magnetic, thermal, atomic, subatomic, temporal, and spatial laws are all regulated by the materializing forces. In these, the subconscious realms, the materializing forces function as intended. They carry out their roles with precision and efficiency. You realized when you initiated this human project that the forces of materialization would play some role in developing the values of your incarnating spirits, but just how extensive a role was difficult to estimate. For in the conscious realms, the determination of value depends entirely on individual choice. The nature of human design required that the optimal ratio between spirit, energy values and material, matter, values come from the incarnate ones themselves. Since they were creatures of free will, it could not be imposed or legislated. They alone, from within their biological forms, could determine the optimal spirit-matter balance. For the completed human species to serve as a conscious link between creator and creation, it was essential that its development be influenced by material values as well as by values of spirit. To actualize your vision of a species through whom you would one day explore the material universe and develop the universe's potential, at the end of its developmental cycle, this race would have to be a product of both spirit and soil in equal balance. This could not happen if you were to remain fully conscious throughout the descent of your individual spirit into material bodies, for the necessary material complementation would then be insufficient, and the requisite spirit-matter balance would be absent. The dissipation, or relaxation, of your unified field of awareness during the cycle, when human beings were multiplying upon the earth, was the only way the completed race would emerge sufficiently grounded in the physical plane to serve effectively as a bridge between spirit and matter. And so you chose to sleep for a while, allowing the materializing influences to flow freely in and around the developing species. But while your sleep itself was intended, the excessive dominance of materiality during humankind's development was not. The excessive dominance of materiality. During the cycle of human development, the materializing influence was intended to engender human understanding of the basic laws pertaining to matter. It was intended to instill in humankind necessary material plane sensibilities for the larger percentage of your conscious thought, and the conscious thought of the humans who hologrammatically shared your awareness to remain available for creation and discovery. The organ of consciousness that humankind was growing into was designed to have its basic life support functions served by autonomic systems. Since the forces of materialization regulate all subconscious processes, these autonomic systems would naturally fall under their jurisdiction. It was here that your margin of error was exceeded. There is quite a difference in playing a role in subconscious human processes and in dominating conscious human decision-making. While the one was intended, the other was not. Before the initiation of the human project, the materializing forces had always received their instructions directly from the field of awareness that was their creator and source. However, anticipating the nature of the highly specified biological creation you one day intended to produce while incarnate in human form, just before you dissolved your unified field identity, you extended the jurisdiction of the forces of materialization to include any future directives that you might issue through incarnate human beings. While continuing in their current roles, you instructed the entities associated with the forces of materialization to honor all human requests for their regulatory services. This is where the misunderstanding occurred. Your traditions consider the entities associated with the materializing principle, Satan and his legions, evil, yet in their proper sphere of influence, these beings are necessary and essential elements of the material world. The decisive current of instructive energy they utilize to govern atomic and molecular formation is not evil when interacting with matter and its many structures. It is the very current of divine design. The materializing influence only becomes evil or destructive when it enters the sphere of human decision-making. There it translates into myopic, fear-centered logic that is not compatible with the more expansive awareness for which humankind is designed. How did the forces of materialization come to influence human consciousness? At one time or another, they must have received nearly every conceivable request from someone in human form, requests they were bound to honor. This brought their influence into regions of human consciousness, where it was never intended to be. The result has been the virtual domination of historical human consciousness by excessively materialistic values. The resulting static has interfered with human reception of those frequencies of eternal awareness that were intended to guide them. While it is appropriate for materialistic values to dominate atomic and subatomic realms, they become extremely destructive when they dominate human determination. For they effectively move the whole seat of decision-making from the eternal awareness of spirit to the individual's accumulated knowledge of good and evil. The fearful logic and tendencies toward exaggeration that accrue from this misappropriated influence have caused the confusion in human understanding that has led to these past millennia of history. They have led many of your incarnating spirits into forms of self-understanding that correspond to neither your intentions nor reality. Under the dominance of the materializing influence, or the spell of matter, many of the early human incarnations came to discredit their own perspectives, doubting their source and validity. Since they were designed to be guided by these, their own views, Discrediting them was like destroying one of their primary senses. They blinded themselves spiritually. They were perceiving a 7-dimensional physical planet in 3 dimensions. Understandably, without their primary means of terrestrial guidance, they began to encounter navigational difficulties. These difficulties only confirmed the doubts they had regarding the validity of their inherent spiritual perception. Quickly, they lost the self-confidence that, like a gyroscope, was designed to stabilize their eternal awareness while incarnate in biological form. Mistrusting their own perception, they began placing exaggerated emphasis on the experience and perception of others. They assigned spirit credibility externally, where it had no place. Ultimately, they believed the influences coming from outside themselves were more real than the influence coming from the presence of God within them. Believing lies, they exchanged their beautifully unique individuality for conformity to a fear-centered external code. Though it would not be until the end of the historical gestation process that your unified field would again be activated, awakening humankind to a common field of awareness. Your species was intended to remain conscious of their eternal spirits throughout their multiplication and flourishing on the earth. Since you had given the spirits incarnating in human form jurisdiction over the forces of materialization, you had assumed that incarnating spirits would accurately assess the appropriate extent of the materializing influence and regulate it accordingly. It had occurred to no one that they might so overemphasize the values associated with sensory impressions that they would forget their eternal origins, and thus, their purpose for taking on human form. It was natural that sensory input would have to be assigned a proper place in the value system of each newly incarnate one. Natural that it might even dominate for a time while adjustments were made. But the possibility was not anticipated that sensory interpretations might block out all other awareness in some entities, curtailing even their very memory of self, fostering a period of historical amnesia during which whole human societies would degenerate into barbarism and savagery. Nor was it necessary. Since their origin as individualized entities on the higher frequencies of eternal being, the spirits incarnating into human form have been gifted with complete freedom of will. Their original fall from consciousness was no more necessary then than the daily repetition of it is now.